the name of my talk tonight, and again, if you find any value, not so much in my talk, but in Miriam's talk or whatever, we try to keep all our talks up on YouTube. That's why we're always being videographed. Hello, Earth. You know, so if you guys ever want to refer anybody who you think might find value from these talks, that would be great. So my topic tonight is called Tear Down the Wall. And anybody who knows me, you know, knows that I have really two passions professionally. So we won't get into my personal passions, but we'll talk about my professional passions. And professionally, and I think both of them sort of are related or feed into each other, or sort of are part of the same package. And that's to advocate for cancer survivors. And number two is to try to teach cancer survivors how to interact with their medical team. Because sometimes the medical team can be a very ominous and terrifying proposition, especially with the history of the way the medical professions comport themselves. Believe it or not a lot of people dress like I do in the office. I know that's going to shock you, but that's really true. So I know that. So what I hope tonight for you to gain is maybe, a lot of you guys have already been through treatment or whatever, but maybe some of the tools that we talked about tonight might be useful to you still, or you might be able to pass on to some friends or people that you're helping through their journey through cancer. So I'd like to start my talk with a quote from probably the father of modern Western medicine, Hippocrates, who about 2,300 years ago said, "It is more important to know about the sort of person that has the disease than to know what sort of disease a person has." And I thought that was a perfect quote, because that's really what it's all about, is when you go to your caregiver, you want to make sure that they are more interested in you as a person than as in a piece of meat. And I hope I'm going to be able to bring you to that point that you know how deserving you are of that sort of treatment. And I want you guys all to know that not only are you deserving of that treatment, it is really your right to receive personalized treatment, especially when it comes to cancer. So whoever's interested in doing this visualization exercise, close your eyes. And I want you guys who are survivors to remember, not the moment that you were told that you had cancer, but the moment leading up to that time. I want you to remember the first time you might have been in the shower and you were cleaning yourself and might have found a lump in your breast, or where you might have been shaving and you felt a lump in your neck, or you might have gone to the bathroom and noticed some blood that you might have said, "Did this just come from me?" Or you might have been basically feeling sort of short of breath or tired and walking, and you'd start having a cough and you wouldn't know where that came from. And then I want you to remember the fear that you might have had, because we all have denial mechanisms which are very strong, but eventually when the antibiotics don't work or the symptoms don't recede and the medications and the pain relief just doesn't come your way, there's something in the back of your head that says, you know, this is probably something that's not normal. This is probably not just a headache. This is probably not just a cyst. This is probably a problem, and you may have suppressed that, but I know the fear starts to build. And now I want you to take that step where now you're in your doctor's office and they start telling you, you know, I'm a little worried about this. You have a lesion. You have a neoplasm. You have a spot. You have something abnormal going on. We need to do further testing. And then I want you to remember all of those days where you had to go for your special tests and your MRIs, and you had to have your breasts squished, and you had to have needles put in you, and you had to have surgeries and cuts and all sorts of invasive things done to you. And now I want you to remember those days while you were waiting and waiting and waiting for that phone to ring, and waiting to get that news that this was not a problem, that this was a normal thing. And I want you to remember the moment that you sat in your chair, and I want you to remember the experience of how powerful it was when that person came into that room, that doctor or nurse practitioner who sat down next to you and told you that you had cancer. And I want you to use that to think about what I'm going to tell you tonight, because I want to change the entire game of how you interact with your people who are your healthcare providers. I want to give you guys information that you're not going to get anywhere else. I want you guys to be empowered with the righteous identification of what you deserve in your doctor's office when you have cancer. And that's what tonight's talk is really all about. And I hope I'm able to do that. Historically, the patient-doctor relationship is the second holiest relationship that human beings can engage in. Of course, there's parental, and we're talking about familial, and we're talking about partnership relations, husbands and wives and things, and children. But we're going to put that on the side. We're going to just talk about sort of the frailties of life. So there's your rabbi, your priest, whoever, your shaman, and you, where there's spiritual talk that goes between. There's an interaction, there's an interface of the highest degree, and I can't deny that. But besides that, probably coming in third place is probably your lawyer. And I hate lawyers, you all know that. Well, you talk about the frailties of life and the realities and practicalities of everyday life. But I think the second most holy interaction in our humanity and in our frailty is that between a patient and their doctor. And I think this has really been the truth for thousands of years. I mean, it predates Christ, it predates, it predates Hippocrates. There's always been a healer. There's always been a village holy man who would come and in the beginning of time, who knew from disease? People would think disease came from gods, or you were being punished for doing something wrong or had some bad luck or whatever. And Hippocrates, the reason why he's the father of modern Western medicine is because he sort of changed the way we looked at disease. Meaning people weren't deserving of disease from punishment from the gods or punitively, but rather from it being a disease, from suffering from a disease. And that changed the entire game. And we've been evolving ever since. And I'm going to ask someone to answer this question. What is the most holy of this holy relationship? What is the most important component of that relationship? Can anyone tell me?
Trust.
Okay.
Communication.
Compassion.
How about this? How about touch? Right? When your healthcare provider touches you, there is a sanctity to that. And sadly, what began in medicine so beautifully, which was the physical examination, which was a and I remember learning as a student all of the neat things, how to percuss, how to palpate, how to listen, how to do all of these cool things, how to observe. And over the last 30 years of my career, the importance of the physical examination has almost basically been eliminated. First came the x-ray, right? Then came the blood, actually first came the blood work, then came the x-ray, then came the CAT scan, then came the MRI. And as all of these technologies are evolving, the doctors became more and more and more distant from their patients and moved away from touch. So right from the beginning, in contemporary society, in contemporary medicine, we've already been losing that glue, that adhesive that really connects you to your caregiver. And even in a surgical procedure, it takes 30 minutes to begin the cut because you begin being dehumanized by all the layers of protection, all the layers of decontamination and sterility, where they're opening you up, but the only thing you see is this little blue hole. You know, you see this blue drape, and then there's this little hole, and that's it. You're not a person anymore. You've just become a piece of meat. And that's sad, and we're going to kind of figure out ways around that. We have to basically regain that sanctity, and you need to deserve to have that. Also, you have to understand that these technical breakthroughs are not a bad thing, because now these technical aspects have brought us to early detection and to better survival rates and to better medicine. So I'm not telling you guys that we need to go back to 540 BC, but I do think that we need some balance. Another distancing thing is I'm using you, Ruben, tonight. You're my camera. So Ruben gets a disease and he goes to WebMD. And he becomes an expert in his disease. So all of a sudden, Ruben walks into the room and he's Dr. Ruben now. So, that's another area where the distance between, it's not just the doctors. You have to understand, in addition, the medical training, more European, but definitely American as well, is the elitism that sort of comes part and parcel of your education. You have to go through a selection process which is incredibly stringent. You're one of 20 or 30 people that get picked to go into the field. It's not anyone who wants to be a doctor can be a doctor. It just doesn't happen that way. You have to go through undergraduate studies and research, and I've had many friends who are fine physicians that not only had to go through that, but had to go to get their PhDs or do other things or do research, or even go to another country or Caribbean country, European country in order to get their degrees and then take tests and have to fight their way back to the United States. So there's a level of elitism that's taught to us. We're the special. We're thought of, we're treated differently, and that comes across to our patients. The wall is already being constructed, separating us from our patients from the minute we walk into medical school, from the minute we're accepted to medical school. There's already a differentiation. There's a distancing between the patient and the doctor. And now there's a public decree also where doctors are not who we used to be, which is not a bad thing. We've come down to earth, which is okay, but the rebound effect has also been some hostility toward the medical field. The malpractice, situation now is out of control, absolutely out of control. Doctors now are seen, and medical procedures are seen as an opportunity for some people to make some money, even if nothing is done wrong. There are millions and millions of lawsuits that are just because it's the way our system allows people to sue anybody for anything at any time. And again, the lawyers that I'm so fond of, perpetuate this. They have a very strong lobby, and the physicians have a very weak lobby. In addition, in the old days, not anymore, but the doctors used to, getting back to the elitism, make a lot of money. And in the old days, in the 1930s and the 40s and the 50s, blah, 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 there was a huge difference between the amount of money that a doctor would make and a businessman or a stockbroker. Now it's really switched, where really stockbrokers and business people make far more money than doctors, but that still distances the doctor from his patients or her patients. And there's also, to be fair, we are taught in medical school and trained to be scientifically objective. And the thought process to be scientifically objective is to remove yourself, to detach yourself from the interface between you and your patient. It's extraordinarily taboo to have a relationship with a patient, to know your patient, to be able to know something personal about your patient, or God forbid they should know something personal about you, right? You guys know my bank account numbers, you guys know my turn-ons, my turn-offs, my favorite colors. I mean, it's ridiculous, but that is taboo stuff. And there is, we're going to talk about some pitfalls about that as well. But what do patients really want? What do you guys really, at the end of the day, do you want, getting back to that visualization exercise I told you, do you want to walk into that office, and when you're told you have cancer, you want to have somebody in a starched, stiff, white coat who is only thinking about what time their dinner reservations are or their tee-off time, and not even know your name other than what's on the chart? Or do you want someone who really knows who you are and really gives a shit that he has to tell you? And I don't mean to use the masculine, I just happen to be masculine. But, whatever. Do you want them to know who you are when they're telling you this stuff? Do you want them to want you to live? Or do you want them just to care that they're performing proper medicine? And the funny thing about it is one of the things that inspired me, to investigate this further was actually a radiation oncology article, which is very rare. Radiation oncologists are more peripheral, blah, 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 and it was a radiation oncology article from the University of Pittsburgh in 2007, which actually asked, what do patients want from their oncologist, the radiation oncologist? Do they want to be called by their first name? Do the patients want to be hugged? Do patients want X, Y, and Z, more personal touch? And believe me, from dollars to donuts, the response was striking, that patients want to be thought of as more than a piece of meat. They want to be thought of as a human being. And what I did a couple of years ago is that I had done some questionnaires in order to achieve some data, and I accumulated this data from 2006 to 2008, and I had 300 people, which were not stratified by the site or the stage of their disease. There were 127 men and 173 women, and they were 3 separate events in a non-repetitive cohort, meaning that they were new people, that I didn't keep asking the same questions to the same people. And the first question I asked is, when you go to your doctor, do you want to call them by their title, or do you want to call them by their name? And we had a 96, 88, and 74% response that they wanted to identify with their physician in a more personal way. Do you want someone to wear a white coat and tie, the armor, right, the distancing armor, or do you want them to wear casual? Now, I'm not talking Eanelli casual. I'm just talking about that, And the numbers were 90, 74, and 80% for the casual. Do you want to communicate with your physician by calling the front desk, which is invariably a barrier to try to get a doctor on the phone, or do you want your physician's cell phone number? And that, listen to this one, 99, 100, 100. I want to know the person who didn't want my cell phone number. I'm going to kiss him on the lips, I don't care who it is. Do you want to get a handshake or do you want to get a hug? And I got 77, 81, and 88%. So people like to be hugged by their doctors. And so that was some of the data, so I just wanted to share that with you to say that it's not just me and my vision, it's really something that's required, it's something that's needed and necessary, and you guys have spoken, and not just Croc. Croc is just basically a barometer, right, for what people in this country or probably locally want when they're going through this horrible disease. And I've done a million talks about cancer and the differentiation between cancer and other diseases, so I won't go down that road. So what is my advice? What is an alternative model to the model that's currently in place? So basically going back to that sandcastle that I watched my kids build when they were very young, and realizing that it was very important for the cancer team, not just the doctor, but your nurses, your physical therapist, your speech therapist, occupational therapist, your phlebotomist, your OR technologists and technicians, every single person that you come in contact with, in the oncology experience, has to do more than just punch a clock. They have to devote their life, not just between 9 and 5, but their after-hour time in order to try to make life better for cancer survivors. That's an absolute necessity. Number 2 is there's a contract that I want you guys to buy into, because there's responsibilities, not just from the doctor's side, but from the patient's side. So you guys have a much shorter list of requirements than the doctors have, but we'll go through them. You guys want to hear the doctor's side first or the patient side first? Well, I want to ask you guys to be honest with your team. And that seems really easy. But when you get cancer, sadly, and again, something Maddie, we try to do here at Croc, is we try to take that guilt away from you, that blame. You guys didn't do anything to deserve your cancers. Even if you did do something to deserve your cancers, you didn't do anything to deserve your cancers. Well, you ladies with breast cancer did nothing. Some of you may have done nothing other than just maybe have a distant relative who had cancer. Thyroid cancer, same thing. You know, the head cancer is a little different with the smoking and drinking, but still, you're forgiven. And the first thing you guys need to know is you can be honest, and if you're going to be in a room with the doctor, you got to make sure that you feel comfortable enough to be honest with them. Because the more information and truthful information that you give to your caregiver, the better care you'll receive. Number two is that you have to ask questions. You have to be involved in your health care. You can't just go in there and let the doctors and nurses and everybody take charge of your life. It's a partnership, and you guys have to be involved, because that is going to absolutely take your healthcare team right out of the game. If they see that you're not vested in your own healthcare, they're going to prescribe something and do a cookie cutter treatment plan for you, and you know what? You deserve it, because you need to be proactive with your care. We teach you here that you have to be your own advocate, and we'll teach you how to be your own advocate, but you have to learn to advocate for yourself. You have to bring lists, and you have to create a book. Have your own cancer book with your doctors, the medications you're getting. You get to keep your test results. If you want them, you should keep them. You should make, I do everything now scanning, thanks to Danny. I scan everything now, but if I have a test or whatever, it's scanned and I have a little file for myself, you should keep your stuff, because it's yours. You paid for it. It's your body, it's your pain. You need to know what's going on in your life. That's all you guys have to do. That's not bad, right? That's fair, right? Now the doctors have 15 things. So it's a little more important for us. We have to basically unconditionally accept you and love you and be there for you, whether we can identify with you or not. Many doctors don't come from humble beginnings and probably don't have a way to connect with people who might have humble beginnings or not be blessed with a lot of medical knowledge, or come from, you know, the black dirt, or come from another country, or be God's special children, right? That we have our lovely friends here. You have to be able to identify with whoever walks in your door. You have to be able to unconditionally accept people for themselves. And that's something you need to require of your healthcare team. You have to learn how to empathize. Your healthcare team has to really care about you. And if you're in pain, they have to be in pain. Not literally, of course, but metaphorically. So any doctor who's going to do a procedure on you says, this is going to be a little, you're going to be in a little discomfort. God damn it, that hurt like hell. I'm not in discomfort. I'm in fucking pain. So, right? I know what I'm talking about. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you've got to be able to teach your doctor or your healthcare team the difference between them. And you don't want to go to somebody who's not going to empathize with you. That doesn't make any sense. You need someone who's going to listen to you, right? If someone's, you know, looking at their watch or gives you 3 minutes or has 27 patients behind you for that 15-minute slot, you need to go somewhere else, because that's not acceptable. You can't be on a time limit when you're in a doctor's office. You can't be told the doctor's busy. You know what? You got cancer. Fuck the doctor. You guys need as much time as you need. I'm sorry, kid. I apologize. I know you've heard
That's a daddy word.
How many patients here have had me as their doctor? What's the first thing that I ask you when you walk in my office?
What's your favorite food?
Favorite food. What's your favorite color? Tell me your essence. Tell me about you. The first thing people say, because they're so brainwashed into not knowing what to expect from a doctor and just taking whatever they get, is they say, well, about 2 months ago I felt this. I said, I don't give a crap about the lump in your breast. I don't care about it right this second. I will in about 5 minutes, but right now I want to know who you are. And they say, every single person who I've ever asked this question to, 30 years of being a doctor, so that's a lot of patients, right? They are stopped in their tracks. They have no idea what to tell me. They say, well, what do you mean? My essence. I said, your essence. What makes you you? And some people will then sort of get their balance back and start talking. Some people, like I say, all right, what's your hobbies? What do you do in your spare time? Do you have a kid? Are you married? Do you hate your husband? Tell me something. What kind of food do you eat? Tell me something about you. And finally, and there are some people that are unreachable, I will tell you right now. There are a lot of coaches in this room tonight. And sometimes I got to really work. But eventually, people come around and they start dropping their guard and they say, no one has ever asked me that question before. Why did you ask me that question? And I say to them, are you not putting your life in my hands? And they go, yeah, I guess I am. I go, well, I better know something about you. If you're going to trust me with your life, I better know something about you. And your doctors need to know something about you. They really do. Your nurses, your doctors. Open-ended questions. We're not the only ones who get to talk in the room. Although with me, it's probably a little but for the most part, we need to ask open-ended questions. Here's another one I have trouble with. I get a D on. Ready? Silence. What's that? We need to be quiet. We need to observe you. It's okay to have a quiet pause or an awkward moment because a doctor can tell a lot, not just in the patient and where they are and take their emotional pulse, but the way they interact with who's in the room with them. We had a talk a couple of months ago, right? We talked a little bit about, we talked about intimacy, and we talked about the relationship, how it changes between spouses, between parents and children, between friends when a person has cancer. And that's a very, very odd, unusual, and strained sort of new, like, it's almost like getting to know somebody again. And we have to observe that. We have to give you guys some space. We've got to sit back and do what we've been trained to do, and that's to be very astute observers and to be very, very good at what we do in order for us to help you. That's what we have to do. We have to, here we go again. We have to touch you. Examine you. We have to make sure that you feel loved. And if you want a hug, we're there to hug you. Right? When I do a rectal exam, I'm a guy. I'm going to put a line here, okay, baby? I say to my patients, guys, I'm going to do a rectal exam, and I said, if you feel one hand on your shoulder, you're good. 2 hands, you're in trouble. So, there's got to be a line to the hugging, if you know what I'm saying. There's got to be a line to the hugging. How about if I say, okay, you have stage 4 glioblastoma, oligodendrocytoma, and you need to have, extraneous peripheral T-cell stimulations. You guys are going to say, what? Right? If we need to basically, we have to be clear when we talk. Every word that we say has to be measured. Everything that we tell you or try to teach you, because physicians are scientists, they're healers, but they're also teachers. We need to teach you about your cancer. We need to teach you about what our modality is. And we can't teach you on the level that we were taught. We have to teach you on the level that you're at. Many times I have physicians that I treat or nurses that I treat. So my level is maybe a little higher, but I have to basically assume, as brilliant as everyone is here, and all my patients are brilliant, that they know nothing about cancer, and they know nothing about what I'm about to tell them, and I have to basically bring myself to a level that is appropriate in order to get my clarity through, in order to get what I need to say, not just words out of my mouth, but absorbed by the patient. And when a patient... What's that?
Instant English?
You got it, baby. So when a patient says to me, you told me 5 weeks of treatment, and I said, well, if they need a couple of extra treatments and I didn't tell them properly or they didn't hear it, that's my problem. I did something wrong. My communication is wholly with my patient, and I have to be clear and I have to be concrete with what I have to tell them. The next one I'm going to have trouble with, professionalism. Okay? Now, I'm a clown. I'll be the first one to tell you that. But I don't think being a clown necessarily makes a person unprofessional. I think that professionalism is achieving a therapeutic relationship with your patient. And as long as you're not offending anyone, which I'm sure does not apply to me, then I think you're professional. I don't think it's what you look like. I don't think it's what you dress like. I think it's all about how you're communicating. And I really have to really tell you that I have to be your friend and your confidant in order to achieve that level of therapeutic index. And we're going to talk about the data, actually, and that level of advocacy. And getting back to clarity and concreteness, what do I wear around my neck every day? That's go.
Your
What's
cell
that?
phone?
No. My markers. Anybody ever see my Sharpies? I've got 10 Sharpies. Draw pictures. I'm a terrible artist. Maddie's a great artist. But I think I'm still effective when I take those Sharpies and I draw pictures and stick figures or whatever I do, because it does help teach it and go through that. But getting back to professionalism, that's something we'll get to in a second. Your caregiver has to be warm, has to be giving, has to be caring. They have to care about you. That's part of this contract that you have to demand from your caretakers. We have to be honest. Who said trust? Alan, did you say trust? We have to develop a trusting relationship, and at least you and I spoke about this. You can tell someone the same thing, but if you tell them in a certain way, you can achieve a trusting relationship with honesty and transparency, but without necessarily having to hit them over the head. I'm going to tell you a backstory, actually, because, no one can be perfect all the time. I had a very lovely woman who I treated maybe 15, 18 years ago. So I was young in the field, and she had metastatic disease to the bone. And I tried everything to try to help her understand what she had. And she was an artist, and she didn't have that part of her brain develop. And I got really frustrated. And at the end of about 45 minutes of trying to tell her something, I said to her, lady, why do I have to get treated? Why do I need this? Why do I need that? Well, and I did that whole empathy thing, but she just pushed me and pushed me and pushed me. I said, lady, your bone scan lit up like a Christmas tree. You got to get treated or you're going to die. You know what? She didn't live much longer, but she had to live with those words in her head. And I remember that, and that was 18 years ago. So when we do make mistakes, she let me know I made a mistake. I knew I made a mistake as soon as the words got out of my mouth. And I took that, and I remember that every day. Every day when I'm talking to somebody, and sometimes you guys drive me crazy. No, I'm just kidding. You guys drive me crazy sometimes. But it's really important. Again, getting back to it's our privilege and it's our honor. This talk is not about me. This talk is about you guys and what you deserve in your health care. Informed consent is sort of part of this. You are given rights. You have rights to know what's being done to you. And it doesn't have to be done where you're getting clocked over the head with all the terrible possible side effects. But I tell the story. Who heard my grandma's story? Not the peach allude story. Who heard the story about my grandmother when she went in for surgery? So when she was a girl, she was an immigrant, right? She was an immigrant from Italy. She came over and she had to have surgery. She was a young girl in her 20s or whatever, so this was probably, so she was born in 1900. So 1924, let's just say, she's in the hospital, she's in the holding room, and she says to the nurse, "What am I doing here?" She said it in her broken English. "Why am I here? What are you doing?" And she goes, "Shut up, sweetie. Your doctor knows what he's doing." So now this was 1924. We get it, we understand, but things have changed. It's not only my obligation to tell you what you're having done, but every option that is in your arena to choose from, and every possible complication that you might have, even if I haven't seen it in my practice in 30 years, I have to tell you. That can be very scary, but it's got to be done right. It's got to be done with caring, it's got to be done with empathy, it's got to be done with honesty and transparency, but it's got to be done in the way that it's not going to take you out of the ballgame. And getting back to the cell phone, the accessibility between you and your caretaker is very important. You don't want, and I mean this when I say this, because I remember my grandfather, when he had colon cancer, I couldn't talk to the doctor, because his lady at the front desk, who might have had a high school degree, and I'm not demeaning her because she had a high school degree, but she was basically judge and jury of what calls got through to the doctor and who was going to get a call back. She was it. She was the one who determined that. I think accessibility is not something too much to ask from your healthcare team. And to be familiar with your healthcare team. You don't have to necessarily have a first name basis with your doctor. Some of you do, some of you don't. Some of you want it, some of you don't care, some of you don't want it, and that's totally fine. But you have to have a familiarity that goes beyond that, and that's really important. And your doctor and your nurse and your caregivers have to be your cheerleaders, have to be your counselors, have to be there to be supporting you and cheering you on while you go through this. Now I want to look at the data, and Denise, I want to thank you for providing the data for me. I'm not going to kill you with data, but I will say this. How many people in this room feel that even if you get everything I told you, that you and someone who doesn't get anything that I told you will have a difference in their outcomes, whether they receive if they receive the same treatment? How many people here believe there will be no difference in outcome? No difference. How many people believe that you'll do better with the model that I'm proposing? I'm surprised that there were so many hands, and I'm very happy. It is actually true. In hypertension, in diabetes, and in cancer, there is documentation of better outcomes when patients have a better relationship with their healthcare team. Hands down, statistically significant, absolutely believe it. Why it happens is speculation, and I'm going to give you 3 possible reasons. Number 1 is communication. If you like your healthcare team, you're going to listen to them, and you're going to hear them, and you're going to do what they say. And you're going to become more compliant, number 2, and you're going to follow your regimen, and you're going to take your pills, and you're going to do what you want, right? You're going to do what's best for your healthcare. And number 3 is a thing called the placebo effect. Has anyone heard of the placebo effect? It's real. It works. So don't think that it's something that's not out there. In addition, that communication and that trust really does, whether you want to say it's karmatic and the universe and we're all interconnected. Mary loves to talk to me about that. It's really true. We are all interconnected and we are all related. And God is good and God listens. And that's the truth. And there's no doubting that. And when you have someone who really cares about you, believe me when I tell you, you're going to do better. And I know that to be true. Because I'm a terrible doctor, but my patients are great. So I can tell you for sure that it's not me. It's just that you guys get treated well. Placebo treatments have proved to be up to 70% effective when 3 important factors are present. The patient believed in the method, the doctor believed in the method, and the patient and practitioner believed in each other. That's key. That's really important. I'm going to sort of close with my last 2 slides basically talking to you about sort of the dark side of this type of relationship. So this is sort of a double-edged sword. This is sort of the God and the devil put together, and this is where you have to be careful. In the parlance of psychology, there's a thing called transference, countertransference, and projection. There's very powerful subconscious things that are going on between your team, and you got to be careful. Freud said, his definition is transference is the unconscious redirection of feelings and desires, and especially of those retained from childhood, toward a new object. So, to give you an example and break this down real simply, when a patient is diagnosed with cancer, and they have either a personal issue, parental issue from 50 years ago, or there was a hole in their psychological life, or their caretakers or partners aren't there for them, there's a huge need that may be transferred from that need, the parent, to the practitioner. The practitioner may become daddy, may become husband, may become this, may become that. And it becomes a very jumbled, potentially catastrophic sort of situation. And it can explode, and it has to be extraordinarily, you have to be very, very vigilant to make sure you work the transference to the therapeutic benefit, not to the therapeutic, detriment. So there's all sorts of things happening between the caregivers and the patients. There's attraction, there's rage, there's hatred, there's mistrust, there's parentification, there's dependence. There's the thought of being a guru. There's all of these things that you have to make sure you guard against to keep that sanctity, to keep that relationship pure. And transference, whether it's affectionate or hostile, constitutes the greatest threat to the relationship, but the greatest potential tool for success. So if the practitioner is experienced and savvy, and feels that they're sort of achieving the parental role, that the patient needs that sort of boost to help them through, that's okay. You use that tool, but then you work toward that detachment at the end so the patient could then take that into themselves and uplift themselves. And that's the whole secret, to be careful and vigilant that the transference, countertransference, which is the actual physician transferring feelings to the patient, and the projection of what the patient is bringing to the table as well. Two quick stories, I won't give you names. I told Miriam about one of them tonight. The Celebrate Life Fund has given, I think it's over $140,000 over the last however many years. And there was one particular person who actually was the number one, who got more money than any of the other people who ever received, cumulatively over time. I got a letter last week that I almost wanted to jump off of a building, basically telling me what a horrible person I was, and how I'm not a man of my word, and just totally crucified me. And this guy got more money than anybody ever got from this fund. So I'm not blaming this guy. I did something wrong. I either projected myself to him as a savior, or I did something wrong where that transference, countertransference backfired. And the second story was another person who was in leadership in the organization and wanted to leave the leadership and left me the most horrible note of how she didn't believe in me anymore and blah, 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 blah. I don't have a problem with that, but I must have done something to make her feel that I was more than I was. So I'm giving you two examples of potential pitfalls that your clinician has to be careful of when we're talking about all this stuff. There's good stuff and there's bad stuff. So it's really important. So in conclusion, so you guys can get your coffee and your cannolis, breaking down your wall. You need to set a precedent from the minute you walk in the door with your doctor. Okay? You need to basically let them know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And you don't have to go in and say, I want a doctor who wears sports jerseys, doesn't wear a white coat, and I can call him E. Now, you don't have to have that. But you have to know what you want when you walk into that room. Know your rights. Know your patient bill of rights. Know that you're entitled to a second opinion. Any doctor who stands in your way from a second opinion, you run away from immediately. Nothing bad can happen from a second opinion. Clearly articulate your needs to your doctor. Okay? Be honest, we talked about this. Utilize your support groups. CROC right now, CROC 14, 15 years ago was the only support group in town. There's tons of support group and support mechanisms out there. Our level of community interaction is actually going down because of fundraising, and there's other ones that are picking up the ball. It's fabulous. Pick your support groups, pick your survivorship mechanisms. You can go online, you can do Skype, you can do a ton of things now. So go out there and advocate for yourself. Network with other survivors, with other care workers. Ralph Cheney, Marion Cheney, the kings and queens of networking. Ralph is the poster child for PAMCAM. So many people in the CROC organization are I admire so much. Mary and Carrie and Ralph and Marianne, to name just 4 people just off the top of my head, who do other things, who utilize their cancer experience and their experience, I hope, from this family, and go out and do other things to help cancer survivors. It's beautiful. Do that, and you use your navigators. So I'm going to answer questions if there are any, and I am going to get coffee for you guys, and I hope you enjoy the day.